So the last thing that I want to talk about is sort of the bells and whistles sort of stuff. Um, One of those in particular is just creating an app icon. And so what we can do is we could finish this course up with just looking at how to make this app official, right? Because it's one thing to just have an app, it's another thing to have an experience. And that's what we're trying to create here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say rest empower. So we'll just call it rest empower. And what I'll do is I'll open up Photoshop and I'll just build an icon for it. So what I liked about this was that it provides me with the very nice icon. And so I'll just go back to the tweet that Sketchfab had. So I'll just grab a screenshot with that. So have a screenshot right there. And what I'll do is I'm using Windows computer. So I'll have my snip in Sketch. And I will just grab a screenshot. Whoops, that didn't work. Let me try it again. Grab a screenshot, just like that. And so creates the screenshot. What I'll do is I will save it. RIP GF. I'll save it. Exit out that. So I have Photoshop here. I'll create a new Photoshop document. And apps tend to be a square, so I'll just do 1080 by 1080. I will click this icon right here, and I'll just create a new one, and I will exit that. So app icons tend to have a sort of like rounded angles for the edges. So I will make something with rounded angles on the edges. So for the radius, I'll say probably 70, right? So what we'll do is we'll go to properties and we'll say that this should be we'll just say that it like 168. We'll go with 168, right? And so from there, I want to make sure that this is centered in the right place. So we'll go to the three dots up here. Instead of having selection, we'll say canvas, and we'll click align in the center, vertical and horizontal. So next thing is we're going to add our image that we got as a screenshot. So I have my desktop. So on my desktop, I will take the image that I have here, and I'll just drag it over, just like that. And I will just scale it accordingly. Like so. And so now that we have our image, so we have our image here, and then we have our rounded rectangle, what I'll do is I'll right click and I'll do create clipping mask, just like that, so that it has the same look right there. Has that same look. And so last but not least is I will actually create a folder, and I will put both of these things in here. I'll name it app icon. And I'll close the folder. And what I'll do is I'll go to right click and blending options, and we'll just play around with the blending options for a little bit. So there's opportunities to use different settings that we want, or you could create our settings, right? And often creating your settings allows for a lot of creative expression. And I really enjoy sort of the exploration of app design because of that. And so we'll just get rid of all these because all these things don't matter. Actually, we'll go ahead and cancel because I probably went too far. And we'll say we want a little bit of a bevel. And I always like to have preview so that I'm able to look at all the things that I'm working on. And so we want to have, maybe we could have an emboss. It becomes really difficult to sort of see the effects of it. And so what if we have, for the highlight mode, you could change it from screen to maybe an overlay, or not an overlay, maybe normal. Let's see what normal does. Okay, just like that. And then our shadow mode is at multiply. If we do normal there, create the opacity. And so if we have up, that creates an up. We have down, that creates down. So we could change the angle so that it looks a little more, a little crazier. So the depth, softness, the size. I'm gonna say contour and texture. Probably don't want texture. With the stroke, we could say that the stroke could be inside. Then the inner shadow. The inner shadow could give us a little bit of some depth to it. And I think the was it the contour, the stroke, not the inner shadow. Oh, I guess it is the inner shadow. Not inner glow, but yeah, the inner shadow sort of gives us a little too much at the bottom. I don't like how it's looking at the bottom, which is weird because you'll think it would be, yeah, look at that. That's kind of weird. And then if we have some satin, yeah, so I guess satin would probably be better for giving it a little depth. And we could have a color gradient and use the blending modes to give it some depth. We could have patterns and using the patterns to just sort of tone it out a little bit. Probably wouldn't want any drop shadows. And from there, we have a pretty decent icon. It sort of gives you an idea of what it's about. And so to take it a step further, what I like to do is I like to add some filters and some high pass to it. So I'll just duplicate the group and I will actually merge the group into an icon and then I'll duplicate that again. And so the first one that I will do is on the top one, I'll go to filters, other, high pass. And this sort of just brings out a lot of some of the details, gives it some depth, makes it look very interesting. And so just radius will be about that. and then I'll have that as an overlay. And so instead of it being like that, it really makes it pop. So you turn off the high pass, and then I'll just zoom in. You turn off the high pass, it looks a little sort of pixelated and grainy. You add it back on, and it really sort of pops. It brings out the highlights. And then the second thing that I will do is take the bottom one, go to filters, go to blur, and then go to Gaussian blur, and I'll just blur it out. Make it blurry enough to where you can't really understand what you're seeing. You have an idea, but like it doesn't really. It just looks really blurry. And so then I'll just play with the blending modes for these. And so what I'll do is I'll just select the blending mode, and then I'll just use the arrow buttons to see which experience I like, what really makes it pop. And this is where the trial and error kind of comes in, where if you remove these, this is the original, you have the blur, and then you have the highlight. So if you take them all off, we have this. We add them back on, it really makes it pop. And so I think I'll go with that, where we have a soft light, we have a high pass that gives it some more texture. So we have this pass, we have this pass, and then we have this pass. And so when we overlay both of those on, makes it, a little more blurrier. And there. So before and after. So with that, we'll go ahead, save the icon. And so we're going to save the icon in the folder that I created for this, which would be George Floyd folder, and we have the RIP GF icon. Afterwards, we'll go to export, we'll go to export as, and we want to make sure it's at PNG because we want to make it transparent. Everything looks good, and then we're going to export, and we'll just say RIP GF icon, and then we'll just click save. So now we have our folder with our icon, and this is the icon that we created. From that, we're going to add this icon to our Unity project. And so what we can do is we can create another folder called RIP George Floyd, and this is going to be our icons. Again, you can name it whatever you want, but this is just to stay organized. And then we'll add our icon to it. So we'll just drag and drop the icon to that folder. And one thing that we need to do before we actually implement this icon is we'll select the icon, we'll go to inspector, and we'll go to default, and we'll change it to sprite 2D or and UI. So now that we have that, we'll go and click apply. And you'll notice it changes. It makes it a icon element, a sprite element, and this is how we can utilize this within our app. So all we have to do is go to select. When it comes to our default icon, we'll go to select, we'll go to the icon here, and now we have our icon. We'll go ahead and click save. We'll click save project,